All right, so this is what's going on with the bike. So physically, it's perfect. I mean, the build could not have gone better. Everything feels great. I've got perfect compression. I've got perfect oil circulation. I mean, the build part of this was perfect. The problem now is electrical. I got it running for about 2 seconds. I had spark before I even tried, and I was messing with the timing. It's got this cheapo Eureka electronic ignition on it. I'll talk about that in a second. But I got it kicked over for about 2 seconds and turned off, but it sounded really good when it was just about to maintain a good idle, and then it stopped, and I lost spark. Now the battery on this is admittedly gone. I mean, it won't hold a good charge for more than about 4 or 5 minutes. I mean, it's gone. But you know, I could charge it to full, and at least for a couple minutes, I should be able to get a spark out of it, and I was. But now I'm not, even at a full charge. But it could still be as simple as this battery. I mean, sometimes they get degraded to a point where even if they're charged, and you think they're charged, it's still not going to push enough to get a spark because it just doesn't have enough life in it. So it could be that simple. It'd be great if it was, but I'm picking up a new battery on Monday, and so that's the first part. The second part is the coil. I'm going to go ahead and just replace that. It's cheap enough, and you know, I don't know if the coil failed spontaneously, but it's probably the original one, and it's a good idea to go ahead and just replace it. With all the work I've done for like 30 bucks. And then we have these two things. They're the regulator rectifiers. And basically what they do is they convert AC to DC and then regulate the power to the battery to charge the battery and make sure that the battery does not get overcharged. And now these are these are probably the original ones as well. And they're very sensitive to heat. You can see they actually have little fins on them to be air cooled, almost like, you know, an engine is air cooled with its fins. So I think these might have burned themselves out. I had that cover under the seat to sort of hide all this stuff, you know, so you don't see it. And even though I drilled holes in the cover for heat to escape, I think I might have trapped a little bit too much heat in these, and these might be all but burned out. So again, it's just, you know, with all the work I've done, it's a good idea to just replace these regardless. I'm not sure if they're completely gone or not, but that's going to be the third thing I replace. And then the final thing I'm replacing is the electronic ignition. Now, initially I thought this was an aftermarket. It's made by Eureka. It's probably the cheapest one you can get for the bike, but it turns out that some of these later iron barrels actually came with this Eureka electronic ignition instead of points. And so I think this might be original to the bike, but it's very simple. It just has like a little rubber wheel and a magnet, and it spins, and every time it contacts a little sensor on the right, it sparks. And it still has a plate to adjust left and right to advance and retard the spark. And, you know, it works, but I don't know if this is part of the problem, but I am going to get a Boyer ignition. It's a much better one. It's one I'm familiar with. And you don't even need to use a timing wheel or a strobe or anything. All you have to do is find top dead center, either stroke. It doesn't have to be the compression stroke, and then you're set. I mean, it's so easy to set up, very reliable. So I've got one of those on order. It should be here next week, and hopefully one or a combination of all this kind of solves my electrical problem. As I'm doing this, I'm also going to go through all the wires, make sure there isn't one where the insulation might have rubbed off and is causing problems, or I've got a bad ground wire. You know, I'll go through everything, but you know, I think all this that I'm doing, you know, again, it's a pretty simple setup, so I don't think it's going to take too long to get this sorted out. But hopefully everything I'm doing, I'll get spark again, I'll have good timing, and we'll get this sucker started permanently. And going back to this real quick, I think there's actually room to take these off when I put the new ones on and actually put them on, but underneath. I think I've got plenty of room down there to do it. And then that'll free up a lot of space to just sort of tuck everything else under and just make it nice and neat. So I don't, need that cover, and everything will look good with the seat on, and there will still be plenty of air circulation so these don't get hot. So that's kind of my plan right now, is to just put these under. So you can see it's bolted to this frame section right here. So just kind of tuck those underneath, and then everything will kind of follow suit, so they're not all just sticking out like they are now. And I think it's going to look a lot better. And I filled this up with all the fluids, regular oil, gearbox oil. The primary case, I used automatic transmission fluid type F, which is very important. If you use that, only use type F. And so I'll give you a quick rundown with how that went. So to fill the transmission, you just take off the little 5-speed badge, and then that hole is where you fill it. And then you actually remove that bolt right there on the bottom left. And that's kind of like the drainage bolt, not the drain bolt, but it's kind of like a weeping bolt. So as you pour this in slowly, as soon as it starts to kind of weep out of that, then you know you're done. And then just seal everything up and you're good to go. And this is what I'm using. You can use, there are different gear oils that are fine, but I like going with this right here. Filling the primary case is basically the same as filling the transmission. So you fill it with at the top there, and then as soon as it starts weeping out of the bottom bolt there, and there are both bolts, that's when you know you're done, and then just seal it up and you're good to go. And for this, I'm using Valvoline Type F automatic transmission fluid. And assembling this oil filter housing, it's, there's a lot of little parts to it, but it's not hard. So what you do is you first slide in the oil filter element itself. And what I did was I soaked it in oil. I poured oil kind of in the middle and then just soaked it in oil so it was saturated before I put the filter in, so it doesn't have to first fill up with oil when you first start the bike. And then you have a little inner plate that goes on that just kind of holds it in place. And it's also going to hold the spring in a second. And then there's a felt washer, and then there's a metal washer, and then the spring. Then you have a large O-ring, which I actually did not use because it seemed to be interfering. I wasn't able to get the front cover on with it, although I have just a little bit of an oil drip now, so I might regret that decision, and I might try to put it back on. So to be determined with that. Then you have the small O-ring that slides over the screw. Then you put the final cover on. Then you have a copper washer. Then you have a steel washer. And then you have the final outer screw. So it's a little ridiculous. It's a lot of parts, but that's how you assemble the whole oil filter housing. Oh, and here's my new Petcock. Really nice. It's actually a German-made one. And this should last for a while. And if you can see, I've got the tube going from that to the carburetor. I like to keep them kind of nice and tight, not too tight, but just a nice direct line from, the valve right into the carburetor. And this is just a really good fit. So that's what's going on right now. It's, again, everything is looking really good. It's just, electrical gremlins I'm dealing with right now. But that just kind of goes with the territory with these older bikes, especially these older Enfields. But I don't think it's going to be anything terrible. I can't imagine it's going to be weeks of me trying to, troubleshoot all this. But, we'll see. You never know. But I think with the new coil and the new regulators, the new ignition, the new battery, all the new parts, I think, one or a combination of those will solve this. It might be as simple as just the battery. And but we'll see. If I have to try to chase down some wires, I'll do it. But I'm optimistic I'll get this thing sorted out and started next week. And so hopefully I'll have that final video and we can take this thing out for a ride. And all will be well. Because again, physically, the build could not have gone better. It's just kind of these last minute electrical gremlins, but we'll get it solved. And while I got the seat off and I'm doing all of this, I'm going to go ahead and just replace this rear fender. I mean, it's the perfect time to do it. And also the whole rear light assembly. Now, one thing I am doing is I'm actually going to keep these turn signals, the ones in the front as well. because, you know, these bikes have a history, but it also has a history of ownership. And it's kind of comical. I mean, if you look at the front signals, you can see the one on the right is actually longer than the one on the left. I mean, just crazy, weird stuff. But they work, and I'm actually going to keep them just to sort of remind myself of kind of where this bike came from. So a couple little quirks I want to keep. Another one is I was going to replace the levers. You got one that's black there, and then this one's all chrome, but I'm going to keep that as well. Just little weird quirks that were done by prior owners. I'm keeping on this bike just sort of as a reminder of where it came from, and I just think it's kind of funny, and I think it really works. So thanks again for watching. I know this was just kind of a quick update, and sorry the bike isn't running yet, but we're very, very close. And again, I think I'll have all this sorted out within a week, and we'll get it started, we'll ride it, and all that. So if you're new, definitely subscribe and stick around. A lot of cool stuff is coming up. And if you haven't been watching, you can go back, you can watch the entire restoration of this bike from the very beginning. Then hopefully the next video will be me riding this bike. So we'll see, but we're really close one way or the other. And until next time, guys. So it turns out that oil leak wasn't actually from the rim where that larger O-ring would have gone, but it was coming from the end of the nut here. So I tightened it down. It wasn't loose, but it could have been a little bit tighter. So I tightened it down. I think that solved the problem.